I was born in Smithton in Tasmania, 1944, September the 13th.
What did your father do for a living?
He tried to be a farmer. I think he had 10 cows when he died. wasn't the biggest farmer. I worked on a dairy farm for the first 4 years, milking cows, which wasn't that exciting, and then a job came up with Tommy Hardy, shark fishing, as a deckhand. I was 20 when I started fishing.
What did that involve those days?
Long lining, baiting up hooks, cleaning sharks. We used to work about 2,000 a day, up to 3,000 on 1 or 2 occasions. Daylight, well, before daylight and after dark a lot of the time. It was often 10 o'clock when we got back to Stanley of the evening time to unload, and time you had tea it was nearly midnight, and then it was often 2 or 3 o'clock when we left the next morning, and that used to go on for several days while the weather was fine, till the easterly come in to have a spell. By that time our fingers were usually worn out and bleeding on the ends, and it was a good change to have a spell.
So you'd be just day tripping, obviously.
We was, yeah, most of the time.
What boat was that in?
Andrew Hardy.
Oh.
Our first 12 months was on the Rona H.
With Max?
No, Tommy. Tommy was running it at that stage. Max, he had the Cindy built. And then Tommy ran the Rona H for first couple of years, I think it was.
So you did a bit of crane with them, did you?
Only a little bit. June, July, I think we fished down around the islands there. I think some Novembers we used to fish, because we used to work down around Trefoil, Marrawar Bay a bit, but that didn't happen every year, fortunately.
So did you have ice on board?
No, we had a freezer in the Andrew Hardy. Ice on the Rona H, but we never used ice very often with day trips.
What decided you to get a boat built?
Oh, I had in mind to have a boat of some sort before I went to sea. I thought about getting a 35-foot one built, but then when the time came it got up to 43. Yeah.
Well, tell us about the builder and what happened.
Frank Bennell, yeah, it took him 9 months to build it on his own, and then he built the hull, put the well in it, and I carried on from there.
And what did you do then? What did you have to do?
I had a fella help me build the wheelhouse, and then I made the mast up, put the main mast in it, and then the ice room was put the bulkhead in, and done the ice room when I was shark fishing, of course. Yeah, and then it was full rigged when I think it was 76 when I had it fully rigged. Done a bit at a time as I went along. I used to shark down around Three Hummocks mostly. From Marrawar, Stanley round to Marrawar was the main fishing area, sometimes King Island. But yeah, and sometimes on the east coast. I've done 1 year down the east coast of Tassie, from Eddystone Point right down to southeast of Tasman Island. That was good, done well down there that year. I remember one trip into Triabunna, we had that many sharks that they took days to try and process them, and the next time we come in with a couple of tonne or so, they sent them straight to Margate. The best day's sharking I had was, I think 2 days before Christmas. I'd been down the east coast for 6 weeks crayfishing, and I think I earned it was about $1,000, and came home and had 1 day shark fishing and had $1,600 worth. I don't think I'd done any crayfishing after that. That was the end of it.
You told us you had some good days. What sort of quantities are we talking about?
That day, I think we had 2.5 tonne from memory, but yeah, I'm not sure about that. There was 400 sharks, a little over 400 sharks, I remember that bit. It was a busy day. I think it was 2 o'clock in the morning by the time we finished cleaning.
How many on board? How many blokes?
Only 2 of us. And the young bloke I had was his first trip. I remember I had 3 spare gaff hooks and he broke 2 very quick. I had to get him on the right track or I was in trouble. So he was right after that. It was good. I didn't have much time to look over the side, of course. That many sharks. I was busy unhooking, laying those hooks up. So I didn't look over the side much. I just kept seeing them come over the rail. It was good. It was a good day. I always remember that one.
Yeah, good. Did you have any preferred baits for sharking?
We used to use salmon mostly, salmon and cooter. That was the main stuff. That was the only stuff you could buy anyway. We used to use anything that we caught on the line, octopuses, bulleye gurnets and whatever. Add to it.
So you must have had specific, like, oh, this month they should be here or this month they should be there. Did you build up a bit of knowledge like that as to where you should be a certain time?
I thought it did sometime, but I don't know. When you reckon you was on the right track, when it failed sort of thing. And then some days you'd reckon, oh, we might get a few here, and then like that good day, of course. Yeah, didn't expect that, but there was. I know another Stanley boat arrived there the next morning and hardly got a shark. So they would just obviously pass through quick. Well, we caught them all. The shark stocks were going downhill, especially when the net boats started in Bass Strait. I remember north of Stanley, we used to catch heaps of school sharks there. And then when the net started, they caught heaps of gummy sharks that we never caught. We did catch few gummy sharks, but the gummies were there and we weren't catching them. So, and then when I put the nets on in 81, I went out north of Stanley, and you know the gummies didn't come that year, and for years after there wasn't any good since. So whether they'd gone somewhere else or whether they got cleaned up, I don't know, but they were gradually going downhill anyway. And then they brought the quotas in because the numbers were falling off. But yeah, the industry was certainly going downhill.
Yes, it was unsustainable. What do you reckon they should have done about it? They should have done something earlier?
Should have been restrictions on it earlier. Would have made a difference. Kept the nets out would have made a big difference. But yeah, they were too efficient, they said, so they had to stay.
Decimate the stock.
That's it. My catches went up when I put the nets on. Yeah, I think we had 4 bins, which was 700 kilo bins the first trip. But yeah, and over the years, of course, I only used to work summer months, and then over the years I started working the winter time, and yeah, the catches was gradually going downhill all the time. North of Stanley, when I long lined out there with Tommy, they was always full of Brit or octopus. Those little pimply octopus, which weigh about 1 kilo, I think. But then when they had that dioxide off Burnie, they were dumping that. Was it dioxide they were dumping off Burnie there? The Brit disappeared out of Bass Strait there within a few years, and when the Brit disappeared, the school sharks disappeared. So, chain reaction, I thought.
Now, when you say Brit, I think of those little things about this long.
Little pink crustaceans, apparently they. I see it in big schools in the water. You see big pink masses in the water. It used to be a lot in Bass Strait. But for years now you're seeing the odd patch here and there. It's never come back.
That's what they also call krill, is it? Krill?
I don't know whether that's krill or whether krill's a similar thing. I'm not sure.
Well, if the Brit went off like that, that's why the cooter wouldn't be there too, I suppose.
The cooter disappeared about the same time.
Yeah. We don't really know what happened to the cooter, do we?
No, we don't.
But
We don't.
About the same time as they started deep water trawling here, and they used to catch heaps in the trawls.
Well, they used to catch heaps of cooter in the New South Wales coast on the trawls and dump them, apparently. And New Zealand's been at it for years and still at it.
Was there a shark nursery there south of Three Hummocks in that area there? Was there a shark nursery somewhere there?
In the 60s, when I went to sea, it used to be closed November, December, I think. But then they abolished that somewhere down the track. But you never used to catch many. You never used to catch gummies with young in them. You used to get a few school sharks. That in West Bay, west of Stanley, you get a few school sharks there.
Did you enjoy sharking?
Well, I suppose I did up to a point. Yeah, might have been better off doing other things, I don't know. But anyway, that's what I done at the time. So, yeah.
Yes, I always had mixed feelings about sharking. I'd sooner go crane, really.
Right. Yeah, you have a preference. I'd rather shark than crayfishing. I didn't go much on crayfishing. I could catch lots of undersized ones. Not much that was sizable on the east coast. Always reckon I couldn't catch crays, but I could catch the little ones.
In those days, would you be getting pots half full of rats?
Oh, yeah.
I don't think it happens now, does it?
I don't know what goes on.
How did the transition happen from fishing into, what do you call it, chartering or cargo? Or?
Well, when I was fishing, as a chap and his son came up to Stanley there one day, and they'd waiting for Paddy Maguire to take them out to Albatross Island. And Paddy reckoned it was hard to land on. And I'd got talking to these couple of chaps this morning, and they wanted to know how hard it was to land. I said, well, I've never been near the Albatross. And was I interested in taking them out? I said, well, I can take you out, can't guarantee anything. So anyway, we went out there, and the wind was fairly fresh southwest, and we anchored there on the Morris line, put them ashore, set up their camp, and well, that was all right. Went back and got them, I think, a month later. And then those two people knew Nigel Brothers, which is a bird over Parks and Wildlife, and well, he started coming up, him and others, and doing bird work on the Albatross on Albatross Island. And then, of course, that spread from islands in Eastern Bass Strait, and then later on we'd done surveys on seals and birds on Pedra Branca and Musestone, and yeah, all started from those two people. With Albatross Island, you land in that little gulch on the northeast corner, which can be very surgy. You've got to watch you don't get swept up on the rocks, and then you've got the stream curve in the corner. You've got to get through with your oars, you get tangled up in it. But later years it seemed to be pretty good landing out there. Whether I got the knack of it, I don't know, but you never had any trouble there anyway. But Pedra Branca was different.
While we're on Albatross, there's big caves there, isn't there, that the birders used to
There is a big cave there, yeah.
camp in?
Goes through the northern section into the gap in the island, and then the cave continues into the southern part, and then as the top has fallen in, of course. Pedra Branca, you had to watch what you were doing. It was at least you was in deep water. You couldn't see the bottom under you, but when you put people ashore there, you had, well, I used to tell them to face the stern of the dinghy, keep their fingers from over the side, and go when I say go. Because there's only one rock you could step on, and the sea coming round the northern end, there's always a current running down along there pushing you sideways. So when you had to come up and up with the swell to be up that rock so they could step ashore, and often you'd be too far away either side. So you might have several goes to get some, and then anyway, and then you'd say go, and then they'd step ashore. Well, one day, one fellow was ready, I was coming up and he jumped out. Well, he went down through the bull kelp, and then he come up through the bull kelp, and then he was down, and I was behind him singing out, I'm right behind you, and someone on the rock threw a line down. Anyway, got him back in the dinghy, and then you could feel the vibration. Next time round, he didn't go till I say go, but he was right the next time. Yeah, but yeah, you know, there's some airy times there, and the water, of course, coming around, breaking around that north. Then you're always in foamed up white water. It wasn't breaking, but it was well aerated. They camp up there, and then you got the rest of the island, which is probably another 50 feet or so above that, so you can protected from the seas pounding the western side.
So how long would people stay out there for?
Oh, usually about week or 10 days. Yeah. They got washed off out there one trip. I didn't take them out there that trip, but that's another story.
What do you know about the story?
I was out there on a really, really nasty blow. And the sea got, it was hard northeast for 2 days, I think, from memory. And then it went around to the west. It only blew about 30 knots, but the sea got bigger and bigger. And it finally got big enough as it come over, the saddle on the southern end of it. The sea broke right over through that saddle. It took, I think it was 80% of the birds off the island. And a lot of their camp gear got washed off the ledge. So they decided they better get around the back and get up to the top. Well, they had to go around the northern end and to the start of the western side to get to the top. They made a run for it, and one young fellow there was behind, and apparently the sea broke up over them, and they was hanging onto a rock. And when the sea went back, one fellow wasn't there. He just got taken off. Pretty tragic that was. Never found him, of course. Well, he'd be minced, I suppose, by the time he got to sea level.
Yeah, that must have been a horrible sea on to be breaking up that high.
You know, I was down at research, I think it was a week after, and I thought I went ashore because there's going to be a lot of the sea's been up into the creeks, and there's no indication, no big surge has been up into the creeks, nothing whatsoever. And I was around at Port Davey, I think about a week later, and no indication of a big sea being on around there anywhere. So it was, whatever it was a narrow strip out at the Mewstone. Yeah, and that's yeah. It's better than Pedra Branca, but it's on the north face, and the wind on that south coast, of course, is nearly always northwesterly. And there's a little narrow edge that runs up at an angle there. You put them on, and they got to scamper up there before the sea catches up with them again. I put one fella ashore there one day, and he slipped, but he didn't fall in. And then by the time he got to his feet, the next sea caught up with him and swept him off. Well, he swirled around the rocks and swirled back, of course. I got him in the dinghy again, but yeah, no, it didn't look good. Someone in the water trying to chase. We put a camera crew there on the Needles. Nigel Brothers went ashore first, and then we had this fellow with the camera with his big box and all, he loaded up with his camera gear. And of course I told him the same thing, to face the stern of the dinghy with his fingers inboard and not to go till I say go. Well, the swell's coming up, I said get ready, and he jumped. Didn't say go. Well, he jumped on, it was an overhanging rock, of course, and he was landed his front part, but his legs was in mid-air. And I'm telling him, get going, the next swell's a bigger one. But anyway, the swell lifted him up on the rocks and got his gear wet, and he got wet. But yeah, he didn't go in.
What else? Any other birding episodes?
What else? Yeah, we'd done seal surveys in Bass Strait, but yeah, that all went pretty smooth.
Where did you go on the seal surveys?
Barrenjoey was the common one, and what's the one out? Moriarty Rocks, east side of Clark Island, and Judgment Rocks, southwest of Deal, and over to East Moncur was the ones we done. Sometimes we went to Reed's Rocks at south of King Island as well.
Did they camp there with their surveys, or did you just a day trip?
Only on Judgment Rocks. They camped ashore. They was usually there for about a week at a time. Yeah.
Where's Judgment Rocks?
Southwest of Deal Island, eastern Bass Strait, northeastern Bass Strait, between Flinders and Wilson's Prom.
Right. The seals on Wright's Rocks too, is there?
Wright's, there is a few, all out. Yeah, we used to check that. I think there might have been a pup or two there, but yeah, it's only a few seals there, sort of thing. The waves ride pretty well up on that, being a big flat sort of a slab.
Did you ever land anyone on the Black Pyramid?
Yeah, it was out there a couple of times. Put an artist out. The first artist with a couple of people that I took to Albatross, they went out to Pyramid for a month, one trip. Yeah, that was easy enough to land on. It was a calm day, of course. It's interesting rock. All the different, that basalt that's curved up and sandstone strip up towards the top, and then, can't remember what the top was.
Probably all bird dung, is it?
Well, the bulk of it. I know there's skinks and ants and scorpions on there. And lots of gannets these days.
There wasn't as many gannets in the early days, was there?
No, no. I think, well, Parks reckon that the, what's the islands up the other side of Flinders? Where the gannets used to nest.
East of Flinders? Oh.
Next,
Cat?
Cat and Storehouse. Yeah, that's been abandoned now. The Albatross, the gannets abandoned that years ago.
Either they abandoned it or they were all used for prey bait.
Well, good question, yeah. Yeah. Wasting the time trying to raise chicks there. Seem to disappear all the time.
But they use penguins for bait, mind you.
I'd heard about that.
They dig wells on their tracks, like
Oh, yeah.
holes.
That'd
They
work.
fall in,
That'd work.
go in the morning, get your bait.
The bigger the hole, the bigger the amount of penguins, I suppose. Well.
So we hear a lot of doom and gloom about the environment these days, but in my experience, especially here, we've seen the seals and gannets breed up. What's your experience around Tassie and the Straits? Have these wild creatures become lesser or more in number?
I don't know about the Aussie fur seals. Well, Parks say that their numbers have been stagnant for decades. But the New Zealand fur seals, when they were discovered down in Matsyka, it might be 20 years ago now or thereabouts, but they had bred up in big numbers down there on Walker Island on the north side. When I was down there last, the seals was right at the top there that flattened all the vegetation. And since then, of course, they found them breeding at Southwest Cape, and they used to turn up on islands at Judgment Rocks and Moriarty Rocks, and of course now, and Wilson's Prom, of course, but these days they're right across to Albany in Western Australia and possibly further, but there's certainly plenty around Albany now, New Zealand fur seals. So they've, I don't know whether they've bred up, but they've moved over if nothing else.
Gannets?
Don't know about the gannets. There's certainly a lot on Black Pyramid when I was there last. I don't know how many thousand would be there, but they're stripping all the vegetation for nest material when I was out there last, which is probably 18 or 20 years ago. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know whether they've increased in numbers or not.
I'll say they have.
Probably, hopefully.
What about mutton birds?
Well, they've got to increase because there's no industry anymore, well, very little industry anymore. I don't know whether they catch mutton birds at all down our end these days. I sort of lost track of all that. I know there was catching some on Flinders Islands there apparently.
I think they still do a bit on trefoil, the young Aborigines.
Do they?
Cultural thing.
All right.
And on Babel.
Yeah, Babel was one of the last, I know that.
And perhaps big dog or little dog.
Right. Yeah.
But, yeah.
But there was, 30 million breeding pairs of mutton birds in Tasmania. So they're all having one chick each year. So, and there's not many being caught, so they've got to be breeding up. Or they're dying off faster.
Or they're dying off faster. We don't see them here like we used to.
You don't? All right.
And I've got some old film there I might show you after, taken on the east coast of Tassie in the 1950s, a bloke's crane, and it's bloody mutton birds. You should see that.
Black with them?
Black with them.
Mm.
And I don't spend much time on the east coast, but I doubt if they'll be like that now.
I did see off Southwest Cape there years ago. I went round there one day, and the sky off Southwest Cape was black. And when I got closer, of course, it was mutton birds must have been feeding there, but I don't know, there must have been hundreds or thousands of them. There was heaps working in the water, and there's others that must have had their feed and they were sort of sitting on the water and they're drifting away for, I don't know, might have been a couple of miles or so. That's the most mutton birds that I'd ever seen in one place. There's obviously a lot of food there that day. But yeah, usually you see them scattered about, but nothing like that.
Yes, yes. What about dolphins? From when you first went to sea to nowadays, do you reckon there's any more or less?
It's hard to say. We've never seen many dolphins in Tassie. I remember one day north of Stanley, it was a calm day before an easterly, and there was dolphins as far as you could see in any direction. But that's the only time I'd ever seen them like that. The best place to see dolphins in Tassie is between Burnie and Tamar River heads. And that's the only place I've seen juvenile, little baby dolphins for some reason. I've never seen baby dolphins anywhere else in Tassie. But that seems to be the hot spot for dolphins. But anywhere else you don't see many. Not like South Australia, that's the hot spot for dolphins. All the way down along that coast, dolphins every day, and you'd see dozens of them. They might have shifted camp. Tassie, I've never seen many whales in Tassie, certainly not Bass Strait. You've never seen many whales in Tassie, not when I was fishing. They've got to be thicker now, of course, because the numbers are building up. We did have 5 killer whales with us for 3 days years ago when I was shark fishing. You'd finish your gear and you'd steam off perhaps for an hour and shoot your gear, and they'd turn up again. You got up during the night, they'd be around the boat. Yeah.
Did they give you any trouble with your shark?
No, I never had any trouble with them. Well, you wouldn't know. They might have taken something, but yeah, it wasn't noticeable.
I reckon they used to take the blue eye off the hooks coming up, didn't they?
I'd heard that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think they touched shark that I know of.
We had them around the boat once, blue iron, down west of King Island, and the saloon had rope paravanes on it. Next thing, one of the paravanes is gone.
Was it?
I reckon he thought it was a big fish. He'd have the toothache though, I reckon.
Probably did. Well, yeah, I've never heard that one.
So, what were the birders learning? Like, did you find out anything on them about albatross or anything?
The shy albatross and albatross, they'd been stagnant for decades. They wasn't making any ground at all. They had that virus on the Albatross Island in the summertime. You get very hot days, and apparently if you check the chicks of the morning, if they had watery eyes in the morning, they'd be dead by evening time. It was that quick apparently. But Mewstone down south, no virus at all. It was only on Albatross Island for some reason. And they never ever found out what it was at that stage.
What about the big old wandering albatross? Have they got any theories on them?
The wandering albatross is going downhill because, was it the females that went north to feed and the males went south to feed, or the other way around, I'm not sure. So one lot of albatrosses was being caught, and the numbers was either the females was getting lower in numbers or the other one, not sure. But yeah, and Nigel Brothers say for that reason, because they mate for life and they won't recover. He reckons they won't recover.
So, carting cargo, timber and stuff, did you, odd islands and places you have to go?
Where did I start? I think I took a heap of gear down to Steep Head one year to build huts and processing sheds on there. That might have been the start of it. And then I carted fuel down to Ceramic Islands for Allison's and carted wool off there. Even took a couple of rams down there one trip. They were bad passengers. Stomped and scraped all night, they did. And then, what do I get into after that? Oh, I think I'd done a run of furniture to Melbourne. I'd done several furniture runs to Melbourne. Then I think I'd took at least one trip of furniture back to Tassie from Victoria. And then I carted a couple of prefab sheds from the Maribyrnong, which was 50 by 30 sheds. I'd done 2 lots of that to Smithton. And I'd done another load out of Port Welshpool for the same fella with a prefab shed to Smithton. I remember when I left Port Welshpool, I got out to the prom and looked at my compass. I can't remember where north was, but it was certainly nowhere near north. So I had to have a guess on my course from the prom to Smithton, which I was spot on anyway. And then, what else did I do? Well, then I got into timber, of course. I've been doing a run of timber into Melbourne for, not Melbourne, but Port Welshpool, Hastings and Napola Bay for the last, must be 8 years or so. Yeah, about. And then of course I've carted timber to Queensland on my trips up there, of course. One trip I took, I think I had 3,000 super feet of celery pine for the Daintree River, and that was only half my load. And
what was the other half?
It was celery pine and blackwood and whatever for whoever else that wanted it.
You're smirking a little bit. I think there's another story there somewhere, is there?
I was trying to think. There's probably something else there that I can't think of. 12 cubic metres the hold is, plus I had probably would have had 2 cubic metres on deck. A light load. It was all dry stuff. I did have some green celery poles on deck and a small pack of celery or whatever it might have been. Yeah, no, it was a light load this trip. Allison's at Ceramics asked me to bring a Toyota Land Cruiser, long wheelbase, down to Ceramics. So I put blocks on the deck either side and a big plank across to make it level with the top of the bulwarks. And then when the boat was level with the top of the unloading berth, we drove it on. And then when I left to go down the river, I couldn't see where we was going, so I had to lean over the bulwarks and look along under the end of the vehicle to see where the next beacon was, and then go across the other side to see where the next beacon was. I got down the river. It was all right once we got out of the river, but yeah, there's a lot of walking back and forwards across the deck to see where I was going. I needed the periscope. When I got to Chimney Corner, we tied up there and was level with the top of the wharf. Rob Allison was going to drive it. He said he'd drive it off, so I told him to go slow because the boat will roll as the back wheels come across, but he thought he'd go quick and get off quick till the back wheels left the boat when the boat rolled over. But anyway, after that she come up and then he sneaked off. That was all right. It was a roll-on, roll-off trip. No, I've never run aground. I've been aground. Oh, actually, I have run aground up in behind Woolnorth there one day, going up with the tide falling and missed the corner and run aground. And then we laid right over at low tide, of course, and then Stanley Fish called us. Someone in an aeroplane had spotted us laying aground at the report that there's a boat aground down there. You know, it was all right. Come back when the tide comes back. But yeah, I've been aground a few times up around those grass flats, and I've put it ashore in different places to clean the bottom too. One Christmas, Nigel Brothers from Parks and Wildlife wanted to do a survey of the little islands down the west coast from Strawn to Port Davey. So we went down there before Christmas and done that, and I finished up in Port Davey for Christmas that year. That's when I met Denny King. And his 2 daughters were around there for Christmas, of course, plus other people. Denny King was an interesting fella. You know, I always pictured him to be a tall fella and live on the west bank of Melaleuca Creek. Well, he lived on the west bank, but he was only short, chubby, strong, very strong fella he was, and very easy going, and never had a temper. Yeah, I met Mary there that year actually. Yeah, that was the start of it. Yeah, Mary done a couple of trips to Queensland with me actually. Yeah, which was all right. I just done a trip to Queensland in '76. One winter, got up as far as Bundaberg, which was very nice. Then after that I done a trip to Queensland about every 2 years for 3 months or something in the winter. And then I started taking timber with me, of course. And I think I've finished up, I think this trip might have been about 14 trips to Queensland. I remember one trip going north in New South, because those westerlies in New South Wales in the winter are really, really fierce ones. One night I was north of Jervis Bay there. It was northerly that day. They forecasted to come around 30 knots southwest that night. And I thought, well, where I am, if it comes southwest, I'll have to get out of here. Well, midnight it come round to the west, probably 30 knots or maybe more. And I thought, well, I better get the anchor up before it comes around. And I got the anchor up and got going. I had to run southeast to clear a reef before I could go north. Well, by the time I got around that reef, I don't know what the wind was blowing, but it was a whiteout. And when I got past the reef, I was running along the shore there, which is probably only half a mile off. I had the staysail on, and that was the year I had the big load on. I had a deck load to the top of the bulwarks, and she was rolling that much in this short. She'd roll away from it, and the bulwarks would go under, and the water would race back across the side and meet that lot that come over that side. And that's how it was going. And then I thought, if you could sort of feel this staysail up forward like a drum. So I thought, I'll get me waterproofs on. I had the handrail in, and I had a safety line along the top of me, handrails on both sides. I got me waterproofs on, I'm going up hand over hand, and I got nearly up to the forecastle head, and she rolled over and run water down the front of me, and I got all wet through and got the sail off. But that was a nasty night, that was. All the shore light, the power went off on the shore, so you couldn't see anything. All you could see was snowstorm. So I got up to I can't think of the name of the little place. Anyway, I got up in there and anchored at the beach, let all the chain go, and I thought, anyway, she took up and pulled the bow round, and it was blowing. Next morning I got up, it was still blowing, but it was probably less than 50 knots the next morning. And then by 10 o'clock, the wind was rapidly easing up, and it got to 10 o'clock and was down to probably 20 knots. I got the anchor up, got under sail, and went about 2 miles and went oily calm. Well, I took the sails off and started motoring. I went several miles and the wind freshened up again, so I put the sail on and stopped the engine. By the time I'd got to Bass Point there, just south of Port Kembla, the gust was carrying the spray out across the bay again, and several times as happened. I thought, get another one of them, I'll take the sail off. But anyway, it did, but not as bad, and so I sailed up along there to Port Hacking, and it wasn't too bad that afternoon. And the next morning it was calm, so I got the anchor up and started motoring, and then the wind started again, so I put the sail on, stopped the engine. Well, a few miles, the spray was being carried out across the sea. It was 40 knots or more again, so I got the sail off with a battle. You know, those westerlies went on for, I think it was a fortnight, till I was up, I don't know where I was. And this night it was blowing very hard, and I got up the next morning and it was calm, and I started motoring, and nothing happened, and never had any more gales after that. It finished. It was calm motoring. But they were nasty gales that winter. Few trips before I got tired of the idea of going up and turning around and coming back, so this trip, get going and keep going. The trip before this to Queensland, I got as far as Princess Charlotte Bay, which was interesting. I'd only ever been to Cairns before, which was different. It was quite nice up at the islands at Princess Charlotte Bay. But this trip, I'd always been inside Hinchinbrook Island, which was very nice, but this time I got to Zoe Bay on the outside, which was no southeast for a change. That's a beautiful spot there in there. The long beach is lined with palm trees hanging over the beach, and you've got the mountains there behind the boat there, which is 3,600 feet high. Torres Strait pigeons, waterfalls, crocodiles and sandflies, of course. And from then on, yeah, well, I got further north this time, Cape York, but didn't see a lot of east coast of Cape York this trip because it was southeast all the time and rained every day, so I didn't get ashore much. And when I went round the top of Cape York, the rain stopped, and that was it. And then I got down to Weipa, of course. Down there for I think six weeks or something. The logging contractor I worked with in Tassie before we left, he's at Weipa at that stage, working up there and still up there. And then I went across to Groot Island. Waited south of Weipa for I think 3 weeks for the hard southeast ease up. And when I left Weipa, it was oily calm to Groot Island. Groot was nice. The north coast of Groot Island was nice. There's a big bay there with the entrance is lined with islands across the entrance there. Went ashore there one morning, I could see some long spears and a couple of Aboriginal kids. I didn't know whether they was aggressive or not, anyway there wasn't. They had speared a little shark, and their dad had speared a crayfish, and the old chap which was called Bock, I think, he was the tribal owner. He was on shore with a fire going, boiling the billy for lunch. They was having damper, billy tea, and they dipped the damper in the powdered milk and in the tea and in the powdered milk, and that was lunch. And then I wandered off from there up along the East Arnhem Land coast, which is quite nice in places. All the cliffs were red bauxite, of course. If it wasn't bauxite, it was granite. I remember a fella at Weipa, a fisherman, telling me at Weipa, if I go on the East Arnhem Land coast, you had to carry a rifle, and not a little one. Because if the buffaloes didn't get you, it'd be the crocodiles or the wild dogs or the wild pigs. So I thought, I'd better take advice and take a rifle. I went ashore this morning, and lots of old buffalo tracks along the beach, and they had been, and there was a lake only a couple of miles away. Anyhow, I wandered along, because they reckon these buffaloes, they are under the bush, and if you don't see them, you get close enough, they'll charge. So I'm wandering along the beach looking about, and then I come across a fresh buffalo track. Well, there is something about here. So then I kept looking, and I come around a bit of a clump of trees, and there's a buffalo about 5 yards in front of me. Back on, fortunately, and he didn't hear me. So he wandered off, and I had a shot at him, and well, that was the end of him, sort of thing. I don't know what I shot him for. I should have left him, I suppose, and let him go, but anyway, I thought I'd done the right thing. Yeah. And after that I finished up at Gove for 8 months for the cyclone season, which was, it wasn't too bad. We never had any cyclones, fortunately. People were friendly, lots of Aborigines. The Aborigines were good to watch, spearing fish with a spear and the spear thrower. I watched a chap there one day wandering along the beach with his spear, and he threw the spear into the water and come out with a little fish about 6 inches long on the end of it. Very small target, but you often used to see the Aborigines coming along the beach with a big fish that they'd speared. And then of course you'd see white people fishing off the end of the jetty there catching nothing. Yeah, then I wandered off to Darwin. I had a chap with me from Nullarbor for 3 weeks out around the Western Islands. I didn't think the Western Islands was up to much, but after looking along the north coast of the territory, the Wessels was good, because the rest of the top end was several metres above sea level, strip of mangroves, strip of mud and crocodiles, and shallow water for miles out sometimes. The only hill there was to see was along at Cape Don. I think that was a couple hundred metres back inland a bit, but the rest of the top end was just flat. And from there I was into Darwin for a couple of weeks to get stores and fuel, and then I wandered off to the Kimberleys. Well, that part of the coast from there to the Kimberleys was more flat country, more shallow water, mud, crocodiles. And when I got to the mouth of the Ord River, the outer estuary, there was hills then, and then the hills was into the start of the Kimberleys anyway. And then I got around. The north coast of the Kimberleys was quite nice. There was basalt country, and where there was basalt there was green, long green grass, and you could hear cattle in the distance all over the place. And the crocodiles were bigger because the feed was bigger there. Big feeds for the crocodiles, so the crocodiles were big. Did see a couple of big ones up along there actually. And then there was can't remember the first waterfalls I come to. And then I went into the King George River, which ran up for 9 miles, 100 metre cliffs either sides, till you come to Twin Falls, and that was it, 100 metres. But there was no water going over. There's probably, the main falls, there's probably a few cubes of water a minute going over, and the other one was sort of just a fast trickle. But in 2010 would have been, that main fall would have been, I reckon, 600 feet wide and probably 20 foot deep in the middle. The other side I thought would have been 600 feet and maybe 10 feet in the middle. They reckon you could hear it miles out to sea when there's a big flood going over. And all that canyon down along there, there's water pours off the edges of that canyon. It's deafening up in there apparently. And everything's wet on the boat. You're in a fine mist all the time. But certainly a pretty place. But it'd be nice to have been up there when there was a bit of water going over.
Yeah, yes.
I got some photos of the boats underneath the falls sort of thing. Well, as close as I get. The wind from the water kept blowing the boat out. By the time I got out in the dinghy to take a photo, the boat was blown out with the breeze. I tried to row in under the main fall there one day, and I got within maybe 50 yards, and I just couldn't row against the wind. Too much. And from there it was round the top end, Cape Londonderry, which was just above sea level. Down through all the islands there. No man's land. I think it was 2 months. I hadn't seen anybody. That was in the wet season, which wasn't a wet season that year. The worst thunderstorm I had one night, there was about 25 mils in the cup I had sitting on deck. Most of the creeks never run anyway that year. Lots of crocodiles, little ones. Used to come out to the dinghy, follow you in the dinghy, which I wasn't impressed with. I had to crack one on the snout with the oar one day, he got that close. Made him step back a bit. Yes, my propeller was choked up with barnacles, which was very common in the Kimberleys, Northern Australia. So I went into the beach, which was only about 50 feet long, and there was a rock which stood about 18 inches high or something. So I put a stick in the beach just above it to mark the spot, and then I put mooring lines to the trees. And then I thought, well, I wouldn't go in with the tide rising in case the next tide was going to be low and I couldn't get off for weeks. So I waited the tide to start to fall a couple of feet, I suppose, and I went in there until she touched the bottom. I got the stern line aboard, and then I went up forward and got the bow line. And as I was tightening up on the bow line, pulling her in, it come to a stop. I looked over at my stick, and I'm too far forward. So I jumped in the dinghy, had the outboard on it, and tried to push it off, and I couldn't. And then I could see the water line couldn't get off, so I tried to go astern, and I looked over the stern, and the rudder's sticking out about as far. And then I heard something crack, and I looked around. I had something on deck that slithered across the deck, and I thought, this damn rock. I knew one side was a bit higher than the other. Anyway, she was going over till she wouldn't go any further anyway. Didn't hear any timbers cracking. So anyway, the tide finally went out, which didn't take long anyway. And there she was, sitting up on this rock forward, and she'd leaned over to the eye side. That rock was just touching the planks. Fortunately. Anyway, I got to clean the propeller up, and I thought, well, now the keel's off the bottom, I'll get the anti-fouling out and paint along under that. Well, then it started to dribble rain all the afternoon, so I didn't get my keel painted underneath. I only got the bar that was scraped off. But yeah, that was a bit of a worry when she was going over, and yeah, waiting for hear timber starting to crack. But I got away with it, fortunately.
Good. How hot was it?
I don't know what the temperature was, but it must have been around 40 degrees. You'd start the engine up, and the temperature gauge would go up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. My temperature gauge is very, very quick. So the water was hot. And you'd go below in the boat, you reckon you had a big fire going down in the boat all day because the deck was hot, the water was hot, everything was hot. You'd be sweating all the time, and if you thought about doing something or got up to move, you'd feel the sweat increase.
So how did you like that?
It was hard to take, but yeah, got past it. Not so bad now, I've passed it all. I used to drink litres of water a day. Couldn't drink anymore. You'd wanted to drink more, but you couldn't drink. I remember drinking 7 litres of water one day. That was the worst day. But I probably could have drank more, but I didn't have room. And that went on for, well, 3.5 months. I was around in the Kimberleys for altogether, but once I got south of Broome, it started to cool off, of course. But yeah, you know, hot country. When you go ashore, the beach was so hot you could feel it burning your shoes on the beach, when there was a beach, that is. And of course it was all rocks, and the rocks was all hot. Good place for aborigines and crocodiles up there. They seem to handle it all right.
Where to then?
When I got out of the Kimberleys, it was down to Broome, back into flat country again. Sand dunes, flat country. There were some good spots. There were some good spots. If it hadn't been so hot, it'd have been better. The Iron Islands, where they mine iron ore up there. Cockatoo Island. I can't think of the name of the second mine, iron ore. That's up, what would be northwest of Derby, I suppose. There's a string of islands there, the Iron Islands they call them. But south of there you've got Dogleg Creek, which was quite nice in there, and then there was Seagull Creek. BHP had up in that creek, there's a spring comes out of the hill, or springs, runs year round. And they'd set up a big steel tank there, and the people it takes care of, they cut a window in the side of the tank, and you go in there and water up to your waist, and you can lean out the window and look at the creek down below and down through the trees. That was nice. That was nice. And then I went around to Crocodile Creek, which was a crocodile in there. And then it was, I can't think of the next creek. I know it had big red cliffs. I got a couple of photos of these red cliffs. I think they must have been maybe 150 metres. Beautiful spot. And then the last one was Coppermine Creek, which was quite nice as well. Lots of beautiful spring water up there, crystal clear water out of that sandstone country. And Coppermine Creek was my last watering place. I got in the dinghy there one morning to top up water. I thought I'd go over and there'll be water over there. It was nothing, and then I looked, and I went up there about 2.5 miles, I think. And I was running out of inlet and never found any water, which was getting a bit strange. And then I went up into a little bit of a gully sort of a place, and sneaking along, rowing along in the dinghy, and I can hear water. And I looked around at the shore, and there's no water. Must have been something else. Must have been a fish, ripples. Anyway, I rode along a bit further and the water's getting louder. When I looked around, I couldn't see any water. And anyway, I sort of headed towards where it was coming from, and when I got near the shore, there was a little crack in the rock about 2 inches, and this water was running down through there. And up a bit further, there was a pool there, might have held 300 litres of water, so I watered up there. I think I had 3 trips up there to fill all my containers up, which was very nice. And that was the end of the water. Didn't see any more water on the west coast, only tap water. And then it was south of Broome.
So did you catch many fish? Were you able to eat many fish?
I caught a few mackerel of some sort on the Northern Territory. I only caught 1 mackerel in Western Australia out of Port Gregory one evening. I put it out and went in the wheelhouse and looked back, and there was a fish on it. It couldn't have been, but there was a fish on it. I never caught any more after that. Never caught anything in the Kimberleys. Didn't see a crow or a seagull in the Kimberleys. I thought, not much of a place up there. I didn't try to fish either with a hand line. I did get some shellfish one day, but that was that tough trying to get on the hook. I'll probably finish up with my finger on the hook, and so I give that one away. I did try spearing fish with my spear, but never had any success. I did hit a diamond scale mullet one day with a spear, but having such big scales it ricocheted off, so I missed him.
Okay, so then you got south of Broome?
Yeah, south of Broome. I had a good run with sail down there. Well, it starts 3 o'clock in the morning, the breeze, and finish at lunchtime. So I think I had a week of that, sailing down there, and then the wind left. I'd had no wind anywhere in Australia, sort of thing, up till Broome, but that only lasted for a week, and from then on it was just quiet conditions all the time. The whole time I was in the Kimberleys, if it was 10 knots from the west-southwest, or that it might be 5 knots west-southwest, or nothing. Just quiet all the time, month in and month out. And all the way down the west coast of Western Australia was the same, just no wind, just light breezes, sometimes. Till I got down to Port Edland. I didn't go into Port Edland because there wasn't enough water barely to float the dinghy at low tide where you could anchor. So I give that one a miss. And then cyclone. There was a cyclone that wiped out Exmouth. That was only 200 miles ahead of me. I had about 20 or 25 knots one night there south of Port Edland. That was the edge of the cyclone sort of thing. That was as close as I got to the cyclone, fortunately.
Mm. And then where did you get to? Where did you spend some time after that?
Oh, I just kept moseying on down the coast. I stayed at Cossack. There's a place called Cossack. I can't think of the port there. It's another iron ore port anyway. I was there for a few days, and then I came down to Dampier, the islands there. Well, they were red rocks and spinifex and hot. It had been raining. It was nice and green there. I think the tallest things there were the kangaroos. Stood above everything else. And then I wandered down. There was a port 30 miles south of Port Edland. I can't remember what that one was called. Another iron ore port anyway. They lighted the iron ore out to the ships there. And then I came, what's south of there? I can't remember what was next after that. Lost it.
Geraldton? Calbarry?
No, Calbarry. There's a port north of Calbarry there. I went into was it Calbarry I went into, where the big long jetty is? I went in there to get fuel. That's in Shark Bay.
Onslow?
No, I didn't go into Onslow. No. I was in around Shark Bay there for about a week, I think. Yeah, which was quite nice. No trees, of course. And then from there down to Port Gregory, which is just a beach and a reef, like a footpath just above sea level. was nice in there, quiet. It blew 25 knots there one night, southwest, but it was good in there. And then I wandered down the coast at Geraldton. I was only at Geraldton for 2 nights, I think. It was a 10-metre sea forecast, and you didn't need to be there. Well, only about a metre of water under me. So I got out of there and wandered down along there to anchored north of Perth there somewhere one night. And then I got down to Fremantle. Well, once I got south of Fremantle, it was better. I couldn't see over the trees anymore. It got that big. And then I went down to Cape Naturalist, Bunker Bay. Well, that was much nicer down there. The trees had got big, and then I come down along the coast to there's an old port around just up around from Cape Lewin, where the sailing ships used to load timber in the summertime. In the wintertime they used to load timber around at Bunbury. No, sorry, Augusta. That was the wintertime when the nor'westers, they used to load around that side, the sailing ships. Yeah, the jetty piles are still around the other side where the wharf used to be, inside the reefs and islands there. And then it was along the coast to Albany, which got better. I think I was at Albany for nearly 6 months, wandering around. Sarah, the school teacher, I was teaching to sail, trying to teach to sail. She got better. But anyway, when I left Albany, she wanted to come to Way-Chinnicup River with me, which was about 30 mile east of Albany. Way-Chinnicup River goes in on the, what's the range called there? It's a sort of a mountain anyway, and it comes down, and it's, I think on the eastern side it's about 100 metres or something, and you've got this little gap goes in and turns round the Way-Chinnicup River, and there's enough to anchor one boat in it. Beautiful spot. Yeah, beautiful spot. So she come along there with me and then we continued a bit further too, and I put her ashore. Oh, somewhere further along anyway. And then the other woman, the Dutch woman, she come along. She was big. I thought she was going to collapse me bunk. Wouldn't have held 2 of us anyway. She was a good cook. She brought cooking with her anyway, so we didn't cook much. She was only with me, I think, for 4 days or something. And she had to go home. She was a nurse. Yeah, I only brought her along in case I injured myself. Got down into the Kauri forest and did get out to the Stirlings one day, but then there was a threat of bushfires, so we abandoned that idea. And then come the autumn, about April, I think I left Albany and came along to Esperance, and then I left Esperance, and then the gales started there for 3 weeks or something, I think. Had a calm break to come across the Bight, and then the gales set in then for the next month. And then last month, of course, it's been good this last month, coming down the coast of South Australia to what are we here? Portland, yeah.
So how do you get on handling that rig on your own, that main soil? Do you use it much?
Oh, you know, I've sailed just over 4,000 miles since I left home. Yeah, you know, you pull on the halyards, it goes up. Setting sails is not much trouble. It's when you've got to take sail off and the wind's once it gets over 25 knots. I remember one trip on the New South Wales coast trying to get the mainsail off in 40 knots. The squalls coming and the spray going past. You run her into the wind and you go up, and by the time you get the halyard off the pin, she's starting to fill again. You get her down a bit and you've got to run her into the wind again. Yeah, no, that's a bit of a battle. Takes time. But yeah, setting sails, that's not usually much trouble. We don't usually set a sail in a gale of wind anyway. Yeah, if you're running downhill with a gale of wind, I only use the staysail, which is pretty easy to handle. You've got 30, 40 knots behind you, you can do 5 knots with a staysail. But I've only done that once or twice. Don't make a habit of that.
So you've said you've sailed 4,000 miles, so you do a fair amount of sailing when you can.
You know,
When
like
you say sailed it, with the motor off or with the...
yeah, no, just sail alone with the motor off. Yep, yep.
Very good.
Hmm.
What, would you be getting 4 or 5 knots or what?
I reckon around Australia, that 4,000 mile, if I'd have averaged 2 knots, I'd be doing well. I sailed nearly all of the Queensland coast in about 10 knots of breeze. Sometimes I might have had 15 knots, but yeah, just calm, just sneaking along all the time. Northern Territory was the same, although a lot of the Northern Territory was oily calm. And the west coast of Western Australia was much the same.
And what's your next project? What's your next adventure?
Finish one at a time. Get home and get the veggie garden going and my trees and tidy up at home. Get some maintenance done on the boat and yeah, whatever else. Be a busy year when I get home to catch up.
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So looking back over the trip, what would you have changed, if anything?
I don't think I'd change anything that I can think of. No. Only thing that would have been better was a bit of breeze. A bit more wind all the way around, but yeah. Well, done it in the wrong year. Or years.
Now, I've asked you this before. Have you been home in the 4 years you've been away? Have you been back to Smithton?
No, I haven't been back home at all. Thought I might have had to went home last year with all the bushfires, but fortunately they missed my place. I bought my bush block in '88, which was a block that the previous owners had logged and a few old stringy barks left, understory stuff. So I decided I'd clear those patches up and plant with Aussie natives, various sorts, tall trees, understory, shrubs, from the tallest to the shortest sort of thing. I've been planting about 500 a year. That's what I aim to do, 500 a year. And I started in '88, but I didn't put many in the first 2 or 3 years, of course, till I got wound up. Yeah. And then I got into the sawmilling, of course.
So this timber you carted to Queensland is stuff you've all cut yourself, is it?
Oh yeah, I started the sawmilling, I've cut it myself. Most of the timber comes from the forestry. Cut some myself, anything that might blow down or dies I cut off my own property. But the bulk of it comes from the forestry. Yeah, and I've got plenty of timber at home to get rid of. And more to cut, of course, when I can get a log or two.
What's been the best part of your life?
I don't think I've had any... I haven't had any bad times that I consider bad times. Probably haven't had any real good times either. Although I've had some good times fishing. I had some good times when I was chartering, of course. And I had some good trips to Queensland, including this one in patches. Yeah, no, it's been good. In general, it's been good.